I would like to take a moment before we get into today's main episode and to talk about my sponsor for the podcast. Podmatch is a new podcasting site dedicated to all podcasters. The platform helps hosts get connected with potential guests to appear on their show, as well as allow guests to find podcasts that will give them a chance to share their story. Podmatch offers many tools to help organize your page, from to-do lists to episode planning to potentially appearing on a leaderboard. Podmatch has it all. The best part, you have the potential to get paid. And who doesn't like to get paid from home? I like to. With an easy sign up, you can start connecting with podcasters and guests immediately. I have been a part of Podmatch since the beginning of May, and I have got to say that it was the best decision I've ever made because Podmatch helps your podcast grow. It helps you get connected with people that have very interesting, very compelling background stories that are just waiting for their story to be shared. So if you are a host or guest and would like to start building professional relationships, explore more opportunities, and have your story shared, I highly suggest that you sign up with Podmatch today by going to joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to start expanding your network in seconds. I would like to give another huge thank you to Podmatch for sponsoring this episode. Now on to our main episode, and again, you can sign up at joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to begin your podcasting journey today. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Lethal Venom Podcast. This is a show where I talk about anything I want with the honest to God truth, no lies told. For today, we have Dr. Chad Scott. He is a best-selling author, therapist, and explorer who helps audiences find healing and purpose through stories of dark tourism and resilience. He's also a liver transplant survivor. He blends mental health insight with real-world travel to inspire growth, reflection, and meaningful change. So I would like to give a huge welcome to Chad to join the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, Noah, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So if you could just do a little introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about what you do.
So, my name's Chad Scott. I am a mental health therapist up here in northern Minnesota, about an hour north of Duluth and a little south of the Canadian border. Taught psychology for a long time at a university up here and have been in the mental health world for 25 years. Um, and travel's always been a big part of my life. And when I went through kind of my own dark times, I really leaned into my travel experiences and kind of learned what dark tourism actually was. And that's like it's in a nutshell.
So you explore places many people avoid. What is it about dark tourism that draws you in, and how did it become personal?
I've always liked historical spots. My parents traveled a lot when I was a kid, and we'd always end up at, kind of off the beaten path destinations. And I just continued that into my adulthood, and did a lot of my solo traveling. And then when I was married, we did a lot of traveling, and we would always kind of end up in like graveyards or museums that kind of had a dark edge, like gangster museums or ghost tours. And um, so what I found is, I liked again the history, so I ended up like in a lot of battlefields and places like that, Arlington National Cemetery, and um, so when I went through a really hard time, so I ended up getting a divorce, and it was, a real dark time in my life, and I ventured on a lot of solo travel types of places, and I had always kind of find myself in these dark tourism spots. So when I went to um, uh, like France, I'd go to the catacombs and the Père Lachaise cemetery, and then go over to London, and you'd go to like the London Dungeon and the Churchill War Rooms and the Tower of London. So there's just a ton of history, and it's like I did it, I think, for the history, but also I'm just kind of in awe when I go to those places, and I've always felt like you're sort of standing on hallowed ground when I mean, you are standing on hallowed ground. I think it's very similar to what it's like being in some religious types of places. Like I've been to Jerusalem, and being on a battlefield in Normandy is to me very similar to being in a religious spot anywhere in the world. And it just gives you that same kind of sense of awe, and it hits you on a real deep level, and that you start thinking about your own life and the troops and the whatever it is, and whoever whatever tragedy happened in that spot. So what I found though is going to those places, and I ended up getting sick with a liver disease, and I was put on a transplant list, and so it was really a severe disease, and I found myself going to even more of those places. So that's when I went to Auschwitz, and and I'd always end up like I went to Norway to find my grandparents' cemetery, or great grandparents' cemetery, their grave. Um, and so I what I found though is going there really came back to pay me during my darkest hours. It's like going and paying tribute at some of these places I've been. When I'm laying in my hospital bed, those reflections would come back and, and almost make me feel like I wasn't so alone in my suffering. And it was really powerful. So one day I was reading a National Geographic, and I came across an article on dark tourism. And it was talking about all the different types of places and what the different motivations are. Um, and a lot of these places I had been to, and um, and the motivation, some of it is sensationalism, like people go and they're almost like gawking. Where people like me, though, you're going to pay tribute to, to learn from what happened there, it's a living example of, we always say never forget 9/11, never forget, all these various tragedies. So going to certain sites of tragedy, especially if there's memorials attached to them, and it's open for, like wanted, some places, you don't necessarily, you know, um, it's not for tourist consumption where, um, it's just, it's too dark too soon, whatever. But then you go to like, September 11th, yeah, very, the memorial there, and it's very, it's solemn. At one time it was very, very dark, and it's still dark, but it's still, but it gives you, a sense of, um, you know, it gives you that fragility of life. You get some of those reflections, and you're like, my life is so, fragile, and it can be gone in a second, and these places are kind of that living embodiment of that, and it really comes back to help you in your darkest hours. And oh, and when I go to that article in National Geographic, they were talking to a guy named Dr. Philip Stone, and I put out a concise edition of a book. So I wrote a book on dark tourism, and that's really kind of how I'm really involved with dark tourism now, where I put out this concise edition, and this Dr. Philip Stone from that book, or that National Geographic article, contacted me and said, "Hey, I really like your book. It kind of vindicates his ideas from 2008. He was talking about he did some research in 2008, and that it was called mortality mediation, where you kind of going in and meditating on your own mortality when you're going to those spots of darkness." And I sort of expanded on his theory with where it's not just about death, it's like you get all kinds of reflections from going to these various places. So yeah, so he wrote the foreword to my book, my newest edition.
So, of all the places you've visited, as you mentioned, you've gone to Auschwitz, you've also went to Erie cemeteries. Which ones have, which places shook you the most?
you know Places where there is the most um where it was the most recent tragedy. So a lot of places have had severe tragedies, but like the Roman Colosseum, how many hundreds of thousands of deaths happened in the Roman Colosseum, but you don't necessarily feel it the way you would as if it happened 50 years ago. So you go to Auschwitz, and it really wasn't that long ago. I mean, what was it? 50, 60, 75, whatever years ago. And that is really not that long ago. My grandfather fought in that war, and standing at a place like that, it is so reverent, and it just like it talks to you. I know when I went down into that gas chamber, um, and it's just like a large basement, like nothing in it, cement walls, cement floor. I don't even remember what the ceiling is, but it is dark. And you could just feel the presence. I mean, not literally, but in a sense, you could really feel the tragedy in there, like the sadness seep through every crack, and you could, envision people dropping one by one, and it's horrifying. So, and then you walk by the furnaces, the crematorium furnaces on your way out. And there's a sign going in there. It's like, this is where thousands of people died, and be respectful. And then you come out the other side and it's like, wow, what did I just go through? And it's like you realize in that moment your life has changed, and it's changed for the better. It's definitely um, it makes you appreciate life. Um, it hurts you that people can treat people like that, but but it also gives you this motivation to help people. Like I think I'm much more vocal because of my time in Auschwitz and Hiroshima and various places around the United States and things that where there's tragedies and um yeah, you just become a better human and you become a stronger human for doing it. You face the darkness, and that's why my book is called Beyond the Darkness, is because you I'm a therapist, and like literally my couch is right there, that where people sit and sometimes lay down. And they oftentimes, it takes a while sometimes before they face their darkness and before they talk about the really hard stuff, the things that, these really dark things that they have went through in their life. But it's when they go through them and they talk about them, and that's when they can start to see them from different angles, and they can work through them by talking about them. So the same thing with dark tourism is sometimes, especially for people that don't, you know, I mean, some of these places I really don't like to go. It's not like it was comfortable going through Auschwitz. It wasn't comfortable. If it is comfortable, that's then I think you're going through maybe with the wrong mindset if it's, it should be uncomfortable. And that when you go through with that right mindset, significantly, yeah, helps you in your own, changes your life.
Some people think it's morbid to visit sites of tragedy, like the Auschwitz disaster, the Hiroshima bombing, as well as the 9/11 attack. Why do you believe it can be deeply healing?
You know, I hear that a lot, and it all goes in with what's in your heart and what's in your mind. And, if you go in with a mindset rooted in remembrance and empathy, those places speak to you in ways that you would never imagine. Just like I talked about the religious pilgrimage, going to Jerusalem and standing in some of those rooms, they speak to you, and especially if you're going in with complete reverence for your spirituality. Same thing with these dark tourism spots. Some people do go in with the wrong mindset, so they might go in to Auschwitz being more of a fascinated with the history more than more than they might be going there to pay respects and to feel the history. And they might be taking selfies, and they might, and that's not respectful and good. And I think a lot of when I go to these places, most everybody, 90, high upper 90% are being very respectful. It's a small percentage that aren't respectful. And a lot of times it's just a matter of educating them.
We are like the small percentage. I just want to be like Gen Z and be like, well, what? I didn't say that.
Yeah.
Because I can just imagine them. That's just how our generation is, and then whatever the new generation is called. It was like
hmm
some weird name. Doing TikToks on top of a grave and then doing like selfies in there. I get that's just my generation, so I do apologize. I'm not amongst those people.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, like even back in the day, a lot of people would take paper and like the chalk and go on gravestones and rub them. And but over time, when people do that, it starts, but at first it wasn't that big of a deal. And like, and so it's a cultural thing for sure. And but yeah, if you're going to be doing stupid TikToks, I mean, make sure you're at least being doing it in an appropriate place.
yeah, 100%. So when you started your journey as a therapist,
Mhm.
um how can you turn to, as a therapist, you described yourself, you turned to an explorer. So how has that journey changed how you see the human condition?
Wow, that's a great question. So I think. when anybody steps outside of their comfort zone. So when I traveled, my very first trip solo was to Cocoa Beach, Florida. And that was a major thing for me. It was after a breakup and I just got on a plane and I went by myself. And so that started getting into my blood doing things like that. So I would go to um, you know, many places, especially throughout the United States at first, um, and then over time internationally. And whenever you encounter people that are outside your own circles, you're going outside of your comfort zone, and you really get to understand that people are all, for the most part, good, and they people are people no matter where you go. They're just people in different clothes and people that talk differently and look differently and but people are people down, and that's really kind of what it boils down to is like you have to respect, in counseling the culture and the, things, but you know, people are just people.
So as a therapist, what have dark tourism sites taught you that textbooks and offices never could?
So I am going to preface this a little bit. So there's intelligence, like your IQ, the average IQ is like 100 points. And then there's emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence can go up and it doesn't really go down, but it can go up where your IQ, your just regular intelligence, basically stays at 100. It might fluctuate a little bit, but it basically stays at 100. So when you go to dark tourism spots, it's a lesson in emotional intelligence. You're going there and you're reflecting on a variety of different things. Like if you're at a graveyard, you're reflecting on a person's life, their triumphs and their tragedies. And because usually you're going to going to see historic grave sites, or at least I have, but you know, any grave is interesting to me. But when I really go ponder, it's like on somebody that I know. Um, go to the Whitney Plantation, and it's a place down there in by New Orleans, and it's um, really the only plantation in the United States where it tells the slavery point of view. So it really is nothing about the beauty of the plantation. I mean, it's a beautiful plantation, but it's very much tells it from the slave point of view. And when you go to places like that, your emotional intelligence from the amount of empathy you put into that, if you go in the right mindset anyway, you can gain so much when it comes to improving your emotional intelligence. So, if you want to become more emotionally intelligent, go to dark tourism places, and it changes your worldview. Um, going to, I mean, so when I went to Hiroshima, um, I walked in there. There's a large mural when you go in there, and it shows what Hiroshima looked like back, when before the bomb dropped. And then there's a clock on the wall on the end of that mural, and there's school kids right by that clock. And I was going through with these school kids, and they looked like almost a mirror image in that mural. And then we walked into the next room, and then it showed that same mural, but just complete destruction. And like I felt sick. I felt guilty as an American. The narrative as an American growing up was we had to drop the bomb. It's like the Japanese were just going to fight island to island and it'd just be a bloodbath. And like, we're going to save so many more lives by just dropping these bombs. But they found out, like Douglas MacArthur, one of the top generals in the Pacific Theater, you know, people like that were saying like Japan's close to surrendering, and we dropped two freaking nuclear bombs on civilian populations. That's not right. I don't care what country you're from. And I went in there. I didn't really know that side of the narrative as much. I mean, I hear pieces of it, but when you go into those places, you feel those places. You just don't learn about them. So when it comes to textbooks and things like that, you can learn from a textbook, you can learn from a class. You will never learn as much as you learn through feeling things. And when you go to those places, you absolutely feel those places.
How can travel, especially to places marked by death or disaster, actually help someone grow or even find peace?
Yeah, you get when you go to any of those places, you see little pieces of yourself. When I go to Auschwitz, it's not like I was, you know, comparing my life to theirs. But when you go in and you go in with this a lot of empathy, you see little pieces of yourself through all these places, and you get all kinds of reflections. So, um, it kind of depends where, for example, um, when I was, I'll give you when I went through a liver transplant, I'm going to give you two scenarios. One, I was laying in my hospital bed and I was waiting for the liver to come. It was supposed to be flown in from St. Louis, and the days went by. Like I was on my second night there, and I'm like, is this ever going to come? I'm really not hearing a whole lot about it. And then I got a call in the middle of the night from my doctor saying that they turned the liver down because the family refused some tests, and we were waiting for the person to pass away, and they saw an opportunity to do some more testing. And so anyway, long story short, I didn't get the liver, and I was sitting there just thinking, like, am I gonna die? Am I, like at that point I was really turning yellow. My eyes were yellow, my skin was yellow. I couldn't breathe because the sac around my lungs was full of air or full of water, and or fluid. And just like I could go on and on about the symptoms I was having. So a lot of them. And I didn't know necessarily like, okay, am I going to get another chance for a liver? And it's because I had to go home, like I'm packing up to go home. But you know, I didn't really, I didn't plan this, but I started thinking about the troops on D-Day, and they had a delay before they came to the shore. And so there's a day delay because of the weather. And I thought back to them, and I'm like, you know, their mission was to get to the beach, to get to the other side of the beach and to fight on. And I saw that as my mission is like, okay, I need to get to my transplant, fight on. Am I going to live or die? Like just those reflections came back at that right second. And, again, you don't feel alone when you're having those. And then the other example is I was after I had my transplant. So I got my transplant 2 weeks later. I got a phone call, and I was able to get it. And I I was sliced from, my whole abdomen was sliced open, and it was very painful. Like as soon as I woke up, I knew my liver was better. I felt so much better, but I got mosquitoes flying in. Um, so I started thinking about Winston Churchill. Like again, like reflections that just come to you, and like I was having such a hard time getting out of bed and just getting going for a walk, and that was what I needed to do to heal. And I heard kind of Winston Churchill's voices, like, when you're going through hell, keep going, or when you're walking through hell, no, when you're going through hell, keep going. So I would motivate myself with that because the history of that, the we'll fight on the beaches speech and kind of Winston Churchill is, and kind of his story is, England was really on their knees to the Nazis. They were, getting close to I don't want to say they were close to being defeated, but it was looking that way. And Churchill just rallied the troops really with his speeches, and people started galvanizing behind it. And so I would have this Winston Churchill voice in the back of my head: when you're going through hell, keep going. And I would just force myself to get up. I mean, that'd be my mantra. And when I was walking the halls and I started suffering, and then I just kept going. And it was just a motivator. Those are just, some, I mean, there's probably hundreds examples I could give, but those are the ones that I typically go to. And that's what the book is about, is all these reflections that I have going through these places.
When you got to like a very deep and very touchy feeling place, it really makes you want to reflect on life so much.
Yeah.
It just, because it kind of makes you think of, wow, I really do feel like, look at all the stuff that I have that these people probably didn't have. So I've definitely reflected on that.
Oh, sure.
It
Yeah,
looks like one huge mosquito in there. If that's a
there.
mosquito, that is huge
We're
because
in
I can
Minnesota.
see
We
it.
we grow mosquitoes like other states have birds, Yeah.
I know this is like an audio, but I'm not telling. I'm telling you guys that his mosquito's about the size of an eyeball because I can see it flying around, and you
Where is
can't
it? I
really
gotta
see
get that thing. I've been
it.
swatting at it
I have
here.
no. I have gnats in my room, so
Uh-oh.
I had truly feel that. Was there a moment, whether it's been traveling or when you were doing your liver recovery, that cracked you wide open and changed you forever?
You know, I would say, well, gosh, crack me wide open. I would say that Auschwitz when I walk through the gas chamber, especially when I just going through the Hiroshima Museum, the Whitney Plantation is the one down by New Orleans. I bring those up frequently because those are the ones that really changed me the most, where you can't go to those places and not be changed. Um, a lot of the other places, I wouldn't say they necessarily change you, but for example, let's take um, the Tower of London. It's where Henry VIII, had a lot of his like he beheaded his wife Anne Boleyn, and that's where Lady Jane Grey was beheaded, and there is all kinds of darkness at the Tower of London, and you go there and you do have reflections and you do think about kind of the Machiavellianism of and the kind of the narcissism and how power is corrupted, and and like how we mix politics with I mean it's very stark there. It's like, okay, they're mixing politics with beheading their wives, and how, like, I mean, how ruthless is that, because she couldn't give them a son, and Anne Boleyn. So, but I wouldn't say I'd necessarily my life was changed by that, but it definitely, you see little, like little reflections, and you get these, and I think you're a little more acute maybe in our own politics when we see that kind of stuff. Like, yeah, politics can go to extremes. Look at that. Okay, that might remind you when you're watching the news or something, or um, so. But I wouldn't say it was life changing. It certainly might raise your emotion intelligence slightly, where if you go to, Auschwitz, or some of the, like even the September 11th Museum, or Pearl Harbor, Gettysburg. So those are some bigger places in the US. Um, or one that really I thought was really significant, but I wouldn't say it necessarily changed my life, but maybe a little, where it was the catacombs in Paris, where you walk down, you go down the spiral staircase, and you walk a little ways into this, it says something Valamort or something, and it's like you're now entering the Empire of the Dead, and there's 6 million skeletons in there. You walk through and there's bones like stacked, you know, head high, and several feet deep, and you're just walking through these little tunnels going underneath Paris, when you walk through there, you look at them and you're like, this person had a name. This person had people that love them. This person looks like a kid. This person has, his skull looks like it could have head trauma. How did they die? What did they do in life? Who loved them? And then you walk out the other side and you just like really like, wow, my life is not that long. In a blink of an eye, I'm going to be one of these skeletons. And, and even though you guys are what gen, whatever whatever it is, you know, you
Hmm.
guys are, I mean, life is not that long. So it's way too short to be in miserable relationships. It's way too short to be at miserable jobs. It's way too short, to do drugs. It's way too short, live your life, be happy. And what those places do, it becomes a memento mori. And a memento mori means, it's Latin for remember you must die. And it comes from Roman generals. They were followed around by these people, and they'd have big parades for these Roman generals after they, won their battles. And they would whisper in their ear, remember you must die, memento mori. And it was a way to humble them. But anyway, so that saying though carried through, the Victorian and the Elizabethan eras, and and now current day even, where The flip side of that coin, remember you must die, is, remember to live with intention, live the best life you can, because on the other side of this coin, you're dead. This side of the coin, you're still alive. Live your life the best you can. And going to places of dark tourism really puts that into stark perspective.
We don't, school doesn't really do a good job teaching about these things. They stay hung up more on, which I've learned about D-Day through most of my school years, especially middle school. That was
Hmm.
main priority focus. Auschwitz, we talked about, I remember in junior year, which in an English class.
Hmm.
Why that was important for English,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But we watched an interview, and I think it was from Oprah. She had done an interview with someone that I think survived it. It was kind of hard to understand what he was saying
Hmm.
because the interview that she did, the guy couldn't really talk. He could make kind of noises with his mouth.
Okay.
And I was like, I couldn't really enjoy it because I was trying to understand what he was saying.
Right.
Which luckily they had captions up, I think,
Sure. Yeah,
if I
you'd hope so
remember.
on something, yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know, the catacombs for me, I don't know how I would personally feel walking if I was walking down a tunnel and I just have 6 million people
Yeah.
surrounding me. I don't know, like, is there like a point where maybe some memorials should stay reserved and not be open and shown to the public?
Well, I would say yes. I mean, there probably are places, and there's probably places they don't show us. Like even with Auschwitz, there were rooms where you couldn't take pictures because they there is a lot of people have seen the shoes piled up where even in the American Holocaust, where the museum is in Washington D.C., the Holocaust Museum, they have shoes on like this big wall of shoes that
Yep.
they took from the Jews,
Mm.
and they have that at Auschwitz. But there's also a case just like that where it's nothing but ponytails and women's hair, and it's sickening. I mean, and I should go back to what I was saying earlier. It's like I feel sick walking through some of these places.
Mm.
Auschwitz was definitely one of those places. But the places where I feel sick, like the Whitney plantation, I felt sick. Hiroshima, I felt sick. Those are where I changed the most, though. Like I felt sick, but I also changed. And you know, you can learn things on an intellectual level, like I said. You can learn things from a book, but you forget things from a book. You don't like it's not we don't remember a lot of what we read. We don't remember a lot what we read off plaques. We don't remember, a lot of things that we learn in museums and on TV and in books. When you go to a dark tourism spot, it's imprinted on your hippocampus in your brain, the place where it's like, especially the darker it is, the more it impresses on your hippocampus. And you remember it on an emotional level. Like those emotions, I don't want to say they're there. They're not, it's not like it's always there haunting me, but it's there when I need it. It's there when I like need to talk about the Holocaust or it puts me right in that, I feel those feelings. So I can remember how I felt when I went through almost all these places, but I probably can't tell you. Like I was at the Alamo a couple times. I can't hardly remember anything that was on those plaques that I saw. But I can remember the way I felt going through the Alamo. Like you have this sense of reverence going through there and awe and it's solemn and like and I and it's hard to say what but when you feel them, then you can articulate things easier from your emotions.
Does media do a good job portraying these events, or does media just really over exaggerate a lot of the events just for audience enjoyment?
I think it depends on the media. You know, and that's where it can get confusing because like, okay, what is media that's talking about it very objectively and what's media that is sensationalizing it or what media is kind of twisting the facts to push their cause or whatever. So you really have to be skeptical of media. You don't have to be paranoid, but you should at least look into like, okay, what angle are they coming from? Like I don't know what's a good example. You watch The Tiger King. I don't know if you saw that one, but it's like, okay, it was, that's not a dark tourism thing. I don't think. Maybe it could be,
Uh,
but, but yeah, there's
no
murder, wasn't
telling.
there? Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, obviously they're trying to make it as interesting and sensationalistic as possible, and
Yep.
and yeah, so they want to make money, so they make it interesting and sensational. Where a good objective, for example, the Schindler's List. I mean, I'm sure there was a lot of the movie Schindler's List. I think it won the Academy Award, in the 1990s. And Liam Neeson was played Alfred Schindler. And um and that's a great movie. I mean, that shows it very, I would say, pretty realistically. It looks like Auschwitz, and it's really a interesting thing. And um So yeah, I would also say like things that really touch your emotions. Like if you do read books that touch your emotions or movies that touch your emotions, I mean that those can affect you a lot. Similar to how dark tourism places do, but I think dark tourism places do more when you're actually there because you're really on that hallowed ground. Um, and I know I got off the question there, so sorry.
No, no. I was thinking one event that I remember in high school watching was Amistad,
Mm,
which was for people that don't know, a movie about the ship that was Amistad. It was called Amistad that had slaves on it.
hmm
And I just remember, I don't remember a lot about that movie. I just remember I was out of school for a few days with a death in the family. And I
mm,
remember the first day when I came back, we were watching it and we watched like
mm.
this whole scene of them on the ship. And I was just sitting there like, what are we watching? I
Yeah.
was like, what are we watching? I said, what? It was just a lot
Right.
to take in after being gone for a few days. I thought, oh, why
Yeah,
didn't I stay
especially at a
out one more
funeral.
day?
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
why can't I just stay out one more day? But it's one of those things where it's one of those movies where you're like, I really hope that they are over exaggerating it just a little bit because what they showed in that movie was, especially during that long scene,
Yeah.
hard to watch. It was
Mm,
very hard to watch. I won't spoil it for people that haven't seen it because it's just something you have got to see to be like,
mm.
because I could say it and they'll be like, no, they didn't show that. No, you just
Wow.
have to wait and see it. But yeah, it was just a lot to
Wow.
end on like
Well,
a go
and I,
ahead.
I was gonna say, what was I gonna say about that? Um, Dark tourism, it's really important to go in with that right mindset. And I think you bring up a good example is let's say you were going to um, the September 11th museum, but you were just going there right after a relative's funeral, like you did. Let's say instead of watching that movie, you had to go to the 9/11 museum.
Mm.
That might have been a bad day to go to the 9/11 museum because you can't go in with that right mind. You're not going in with the right mindset. You weren't in the right mindset probably to watch Amistad, and you have to really check yourself before you go into those places too. I think that's an important note.
I just wanted to say out loud, like, what are we watching? I was like, what? I also
Yeah.
remember that movie was long, and I can't do long movies. I was like, oh, this is too long. To kind of, for listeners that are listening, what is one thing that you hope that people understand after, whether it's reading your book, after hearing this episode, hearing your story, what's the main takeaway you want people to know about dark tourism or something in this related field? If they want to travel to a
Yeah.
monument, what's just the biggest takeaway you want people to know?
Well, okay. I don't know if I can boil it down to one takeaway. I might have to give you a couple. But
Totally
because it's
fine.
it's it's a memoir, I'm talking about my own life story going through these places and how they really helped me going through my darkest times. So that's part of it. So I want to say that there's a lot of hope in suffering. You can I hope it's suffering. suffering has meaning. You can find meaning in suffering. That's what I meant to say. But there's also hope when you are suffering. And I want that to clearly come across. And sometimes you have to step inside darkness to be able to live your best life. And that's where I think dark tourism, people have been doing dark tourism for thousands and thousands of years. And it might not have been called dark tourism. That actually was coined in the 1990s by researchers. It's an actual like an academic research term that came out of the United Kingdom. And so these places really can change your life for the better. And it just matters on the mindset that you go in with. Um, so that those are the things. It's like 85% of all Americans have gone to dark tourism places. Another 10% said they would go to a dark tourism place. So that only leaves 5% of people that, once you really explained what dark tourism is, because it's going to battlefields, it's going to former prisons, it's going to graveyards, it's going to haunted types of things. And, there's a spectrum to it. And then some are very, very dark, like Auschwitz and Hiroshima and the killing fields of Cambodia um, and places like that. So I would say just get out there and do it. Um, and if you have a mental health condition where you don't know that you should, talk to your therapist.
I've been sitting here. The only thing that I can remember of me going somewhere in person was middle school. We went to Birmingham because I'm from Alabama. We went
Sure,
to the Civil Rights Institute Museum in downtown Birmingham.
sure.
That's probably the closest I've been to dark tourism. I've been to cemeteries, but not
Hmm.
really discovering, just maybe visiting, like driving there. My parents might put something on their parents' grave or something, but
Sure, yeah.
the the only tourism thing that I can remember, like museum wise, was the Civil Rights Institute, and everyone. I can't really remember really what they showed. I just remember it was a lot about civil rights issues that were going on in the Deep South, and then they
Hmm.
showed videos that were kind of playing throughout the whole thing, and
Hmm.
it was just like it was one of those things where everyone's going to have a different reaction. I
Yeah.
don't really
Do you,
remember
do you,
any.
I was gonna say, do you remember your reaction?
Honestly, I don't know. Can't even remember. I think it was one of
Okay.
those things of like, it's something that I can't really relate to. It's hard.
Sure. Yeah. And how old were you when you went there?
13, 14.
Yeah. So I mean,
I
I
think I
suppose
was
it's good
14.
to be exposed to those types of places, but that might be, young for it to form like a emotional memory. But it's
Yeah,
good to go to those places. I mean, they are good. I mean, you do learn from a lot of places, but I mean, all your experiences when you're young, especially, you learn from everything. You're soaking in stuff like a sponge.
that's probably the closest I can think of going to like a dark tourism thing. And it wasn't really anything traumatic per se. It was just kind of like history.
Hmm.
It was
Yeah.
they didn't really have any interactive things that went on with it, which I don't really remember any. Like you said
Hmm.
earlier about plaques, I couldn't tell you one name off there. I couldn't really tell you
Right.
one piece of information because that was so long ago, and I've had so much stuff happen
Right.
since then that it kind of just gets blocked out. But I remember going there and walking through it, but I couldn't really tell you anything about what it was or anything. I just remember
Hmm.
one of our teachers was very emotional during the whole
Yeah.
thing.
Well,
But it was
and
switching to
that's
her.
kind of the difference between a kid's frontal lobe and an adult's frontal lobe. Kids are not that good at empathy. And when you're an adult and you have a better ability to empathize, I mean, some kids are really good at empathy too, but for the most part, I mean,
Yeah.
adults are much better at empathy than kids because they have frontal lobe development. And um, and when you go in there and you can reflect on the suffering that those people had went through, what it's like to be hit by a fire hose or to be spit on or shot at or tear gassed at, whatever, and as a kid, you just kind of go through there and see it. Whereas an adult, you go there through probably more so and feel it. So I think that's probably the difference in why an adult would be crying and a kid wouldn't.
Yeah, it was. and then some adults that really feel anything, and it's more of like a racial thing as well. I didn't, I've not dealt with any of this stuff that they go through, so
Hmm.
it would be hard for me to sit there and be like, well, I don't know what it feels like,
Hmm.
and even some people in our class were. I don't think anyone really got touched by anything.
Oh,
I think
really?
we were just really important that we just didn't have class that day.
Yeah.
That's probably the main takeaway we had from
Yeah.
it was we didn't have class that day. But I just remember that's not the only thing that I fully remember is going to that. We
Yeah.
were supposedly, and this was like when I was in elementary school, we were supposed to, for a book club, go to a jail. And we
Hmm.
actually ended up not going to it because they thought it would be a little bit unsafe for kids to go where inmates were. And I was like,
Sure. Yeah.
yeah, that might traumatize me. But I can't really think of anywhere. I've I've wanted to travel. Like I'd like to visit the 9/11 memorial. I've never been to
Hmm.
New York, so that would be like a good place to go. And
Hmm.
um I've seen the Auschwitz off like just from TV and
Sure.
in class. When you said the shoes, I kind of remember. I think they showed something we watched, a pile of shoes that were in the
Yeah.
corner. I don't quite remember the ponytails and the hair. So when you said
Yeah,
that, that was kind of
I
a
don't,
surprise to
yeah.
me.
And like I said, the re, they don't allow the cameras to take pictures of that because they, feel that that's more
Right.
pers more personal than I guess the shoes.
Well, kind of to wrap things up,
Yeah.
I really appreciated for you, Chad, coming on. Tell my listeners where all they can find you and just list anything about websites or just plug everything.
Sure. So, really, the only social media I'm active on is Facebook, and I believe I'm under Dr. Chad Scott. Or no, Chad Scott Author is what that is. My website is drchadscott.com, and it tells you a lot about my book and a lot about dark tourism and a handful of other things. Um, and you can find my book just about anywhere online, and it's called Beyond the Darkness: Transformative Journeys Through Dark Tourism. So, yeah, go out and get your copy of Beyond the Darkness. It has had awesome critical reviews.
And I'll put all of his links as well in the description box. I'll put his website, his Facebook, and as well as a link to his book down there, so it'll all be in one place for you to find. For my social media, you can find me on Instagram, TikTok at Lethal Venom Podcast. That is where I usually do behind the scenes stuff. You get to have updates when episodes come out. Facebook, it's Noah's Podcast. It's where you get this podcast and my two other podcasts that I have on there, as well as YouTube. YouTube is Noah's Podcast as well. And of course, you can listen to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts from: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Pandora. It's everywhere. So just be on the lookout for those. Also, make sure you follow those accounts as well, so you'll be notified when new episodes come out. If Chad doesn't have anything else to add, do you have any last minute things?
Gosh, I don't think so. Thanks for having me, Noah.
Well, I appreciate you so much for taking the time and sitting down with me and having our conversation. Really enjoyed it, and I hope my listeners
Yeah, it's
enjoyed it
been
as
fun.
well.
Yeah, I hope they do too.
Um, so I'll catch all of you guys in the next episode of Lethal Venom. Y'all stay safe out there, and I'll chat to you guys soon.